Nobody from my family came to my wedding, not even my parents nor my best friend. They all went to my sister's engagement party instead. But as we cut the cake, my phone lit up with a message from my mom. "We need to talk. Now." Followed by 26 missed calls and a voicemail. I, 32M, stood at the altar watching the doors, convinced myself they were just running late. The ceremony was supposed to start at 3. At 3:15, I told the officiant to give it another 10 minutes. At 3:30, my fiancée squeezed my hand and whispered that we should begin. Her eyes held this mixture of pity and fury that I'd seen growing over the past few months whenever my family came up in conversation. The wedding went ahead with exactly 43 people in attendance. Every single one of them was from her side. My side of the venue sat completely empty, chairs lined up like accusations. My parents didn't come. My sister didn't come. My 2 brothers didn't come. My best friend since childhood didn't come. Not one cousin, not one aunt or uncle, nobody. They all went to my sister's engagement party instead. I should explain how we got here. My sister announced her engagement 6 weeks before my wedding date. The date we'd set a year in advance. The date everyone had known about. The date that had been marked on calendars and mentioned at every family dinner for months. She picked the exact same day for her engagement party. When I called her to point out the conflict, she laughed and said it was the only date the venue had available. She suggested I could maybe move my wedding. You know, the one that had been planned for a year. The one with non-refundable deposits and out-of-town guests already booking flights. I told her no. Obviously. My mother called the next day and asked if I'd consider changing the date. She explained that engagement parties were important, that my sister had been through so much heartbreak, that this was her moment. I reminded Mom that this was my wedding. She went quiet for a long moment before saying she'd see what she could do. I thought that meant she'd talk sense into my sister. Apparently, it meant she'd talk my entire family into abandoning me. The week before the wedding, I sent a group text to my immediate family asking for confirmation on attendance. My sister responded with a champagne emoji. My brothers didn't respond at all. My father sent back a message saying they'd discuss it later. My best friend, the guy who'd been by my side since we were 7 years old, left me on read. I called each of them. The calls went to voicemail. I sent individual texts. Nothing. The silence felt deliberate, weaponized. My fiancé suggested we postpone, but I refused. I wasn't going to let them hold my life hostage. So there I stood at my own wedding with my bride's family watching us with sympathetic smiles, and the officiant speaking words about love and commitment that felt hollow in the echoing absence of my own blood. When it came time for the parent dances, the DJ smoothly transitioned into our first dance instead. When it came time for family photos, the photographer focused on her relatives and a few creative shots of just the 2 of us. I smiled through all of it, danced through all of it, laughed at toasts from her father and her brother, cut the cake while her mother cried happy tears. But inside, I was cataloging every missing face, every empty seat, every moment that should have included the people who raised me. We were at the cake cutting when my phone started going insane. It was sitting on the gift table, and I could see it lighting up repeatedly from across the room. My new wife noticed too. She told me to check it after we finished the tradition, so we fed each other cake while guests cheered and cameras flashed. The moment we stepped away, I grabbed the phone. 26 missed calls. All from my mother. 3 from my father. 12 from my sister. Even my brothers had called. Text messages filled my screen, but the most recent one from my mother made my stomach drop. The message read, "We need to talk. Now." There was a voicemail. I stepped into the venue's hallway, pressed play, and heard my mother's voice cracking with panic. She said my sister's engagement party had been a disaster. She said the fiancé never showed up. She said my sister had been calling and texting him all evening with no response. She said they'd waited for 2 hours at the venue before my sister finally admitted he'd broken up with her 3 days ago. She'd gone ahead with the engagement party anyway because she didn't want to lose the deposit, and she'd already told everyone about it. My mother said my sister was devastated. She said they were all trying to calm her down. She said I needed to come to my parents' house right away because my sister needed her family around her. She actually used those words. She said my sister needed her family. I stood in that hallway in my wedding suit, holding a phone full of demands from people who couldn't be bothered to show up to the most important day of my life, and something inside me just crystallized into pure cold clarity. I texted back, "I'm at my wedding reception. You know, the one none of you came to." My mother called immediately. I let it ring through to voicemail. She called again. I declined it. My sister started calling. Declined. My father called. Declined. The texts started flooding in. My mother writing that this was a family emergency. My sister saying she needed me. My older brother telling me not to be selfish. My younger brother saying everyone makes mistakes. My best friend finally texted asking where I was and if I could come to my parents' house. The audacity of that message, from the person who'd chosen to skip my wedding for someone else's engagement party, hit me like a physical blow. I turned off my phone and went back to my reception. My wife looked at me with questions in her eyes, but I just shook my head and asked her to dance. We danced until my feet hurt. We ate overpriced catering and drank champagne. We laughed with her family and thanked them for coming. I gave a speech thanking everyone for being there to celebrate with us, and I made pointed eye contact with every single empty chair on my side while I said it. The reception ended at midnight. We went to our hotel suite, the one we'd splurged on for our wedding night. My phone was still off. My wife asked if I wanted to talk about whatever had happened, and I told her I'd explain everything tomorrow. Tonight was ours. She deserved that much. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. 63 text messages. 14 voicemails. Multiple missed calls from numbers I didn't even recognize, probably extended family members who'd also skipped my wedding but suddenly needed to reach me. I listened to one voicemail from my mother. She was crying, saying I was being cruel, that my sister was having a breakdown, that I needed to put aside my hurt feelings and be there for family. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. My wife and I were supposed to leave for our honeymoon that afternoon, a week in the mountains we'd been planning for months. I called my mother back while my wife was in the shower. Mom answered on the first ring and immediately launched into how worried they'd all been, how I hadn't responded, how my sister needed me. I let her talk until she ran out of steam, then asked her a simple question. I asked if she remembered what yesterday was. She went quiet. Then she said of course she did, but this situation with my sister was a crisis. I asked her to define crisis. She said my sister was heartbroken and humiliated. I asked if she'd been heartbroken and humiliated standing alone at my wedding ceremony. Mom said that was different. I asked how. She didn't have an answer for that. I told her I wouldn't be coming by the house. I told her I was leaving for my honeymoon and would have limited phone access. I told her that when I got back, we'd all need to have a serious conversation about boundaries and consequences. She started crying, saying I was abandoning my sister in her time of need. I pointed out that my entire family had abandoned me first. She said I was being petty. That word, petty. As if expecting your parents to attend your wedding was some unreasonable demand. I hung up. My sister called 30 seconds later. I answered because I wanted her to hear this directly from me. She was sobbing, asking why I hadn't come to help her, saying she couldn't believe I was being so heartless. I asked her point blank if she'd actually been engaged or if the whole thing had been made up to compete with my wedding. The silence that followed told me everything. She finally admitted that yes, she'd been dating someone, and yes, he'd proposed, but they'd broken up before the engagement party. She'd gone ahead with it anyway because she didn't want everyone to think she was a failure. She said she was embarrassed and needed support. I asked if she'd considered how embarrassed I'd felt standing at my own wedding with not a single family member present. She said she'd thought I'd understand, that I'd always been the understanding one. And there it was. The real issue. I'd always been the understanding one. The one who moved my schedule around for family events. The one who mediated fights between siblings. The one who called my parents every week without fail. The one who showed up. And they'd all just assumed I'd keep showing up, keep understanding, keep bending, no matter what they did. I told my sister I hoped she figured out whatever she needed to figure out, but I wouldn't be part of her support system anymore. She asked what I meant. I explained that people who don't show up for you don't get to demand you show up for them. She called me selfish. I hung up. My wife came out of the bathroom and found me sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. She sat next to me, and I told her everything. The fake engagement party, the demands that I leave my own wedding reception, the accusation of being selfish for not dropping everything to comfort the sister who deliberately sabotaged my wedding day. My wife's expression went from shock to anger to something I can only describe as protective fury. She asked what I wanted to do. I told her I wanted to go on our honeymoon and deal with my family when we got back. She supported that completely. We spent a week in the mountains, hiking and eating good food and not thinking about anyone else. I kept my phone mostly off. When I did check it, there were more messages, but fewer than before. The tone was shifting from demanding to accusatory. My mother sent a long text about how I'd changed, how marriage was clearly making me cold. My brothers sent messages saying I was overreacting. My sister sent nothing after that last call, which somehow felt worse than the angry messages. When we got back home, I blocked out a Saturday and invited my parents to lunch. Just them, no siblings. They showed up looking like I'd summoned them to a funeral. We sat at a quiet restaurant, ordered food, and then I laid it out clearly. I told them I understood that my sister's situation had seemed urgent to them in the moment, but their choice to skip my wedding had permanently altered our relationship. I explained that I wasn't angry in a yelling sense, but I was done being the family member everyone expected to be endlessly flexible and understanding while receiving none of that grace in return. I said moving forward, my wife and I would be building our own family traditions and our own life, and they were welcome to be part of that life if they could respect our boundaries and treat us with the same consideration they'd expect from us. My father asked what that meant practically. I told him it meant we wouldn't be attending every family dinner or holiday gathering by default anymore. We'd make decisions based on our schedule and our priorities. If we were treated as optional, we'd treat them as optional. I said it wasn't punishment, just reciprocity. My mother cried and said I was breaking up the family. I corrected her and said the family had already broken itself when 30-plus people decided an engagement party for a fake engagement was more important than my wedding. She flinched at that. My father asked if I'd ever forgive them. I said maybe eventually, but forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or accepting that kind of treatment going forward. We finished lunch in uncomfortable silence. My parents left looking shell-shocked. My father texted later that evening saying they'd talked to my siblings about what happened and that he hoped we could rebuild. I appreciated that he didn't make excuses or demand immediate reconciliation. My mother sent nothing. The following week, my brothers both reached out separately. My older brother apologized and admitted he'd gone along with the family consensus without really thinking about how it would affect me. He said that wasn't an excuse, but wanted me to know he regretted it. My younger brother was more defensive, saying I was making a big deal out of nothing and that family was supposed to forgive each other. I told my older brother I appreciated his apology and needed time. I told my younger brother that I'd forgiven them, but forgiveness didn't obligate me to maintain the same relationship we'd had before. My sister never apologized. Instead, she told everyone who'd listened that I'd abandoned her during the hardest time in her life. She painted herself as the victim in a story where she'd fabricated an engagement party to compete with my wedding, then expected me to drop everything when her lies caught up with her. Some extended family members believed her version. Others reached out privately to say they'd heard what really happened and were sorry they'd missed my wedding. The family fractured along predictable lines. My mother's side mostly took my sister's side, because my sister had always been her favorite, and everyone knew it. My father's side was split, with some people recognizing the situation for what it was and others just wanting everyone to get along. My brothers existed in an awkward middle ground, maintaining relationships with everyone but careful about what they said to whom. My best friend called about a month after the wedding. He said he'd been doing a lot of thinking about why he'd gone to the engagement party instead of my wedding, and he'd realized it was because my sister had always been flirty with him and he'd been hoping something might happen at her party. He apologized for being a terrible friend and said he understood if I didn't want to continue the friendship. I told him I appreciated his honesty, but yeah, the friendship was over. You don't ditch your best friend's wedding because you're hoping to hook up with his sister at a party for a fake engagement. 6 months later, my wife and I hosted Thanksgiving at our house. We invited both sides of the family with one clear stipulation. Anyone who came needed to be someone who'd made an effort to repair the relationship and respect our boundaries. My older brother came with his family. My father came, though my mother refused. A few cousins from my father's side came. My wife's entire family came, of course. It was smaller than traditional family Thanksgivings, but it was filled with people who actually wanted to be there. Nobody mentioned my sister's absence or made awkward comments about family unity. We ate and laughed and played games with the kids, and it felt more like family than any gathering had in years. My sister sent a long email that day about how I was tearing the family apart and destroying relationships. She said our parents were devastated, that holidays would never be the same, that I was punishing everyone for one mistake. I didn't respond. My wife read the email, and asked if I wanted her to respond. I told her no, that anything we said would just fuel more drama. The email sat in my inbox, marked as read, gathering digital dust. A year after the wedding, my mother finally reached out with something resembling an apology. She said she'd had time to think about everything that happened and recognized that she'd made a terrible choice. She said she'd been so focused on my sister's immediate crisis that she'd failed to see how her actions would affect me long-term. She asked if we could meet for coffee. We met. She cried. She explained that she'd always worried more about my sister because my sister seemed to need more help, more support, more intervention. She'd taken for granted that I was stable and successful and would always be okay. She'd never considered that maybe I needed my family too, that maybe showing up mattered to me as much as it would to my sister. She said she'd replayed my wedding day in her mind countless times, imagining how it must have felt to stand there alone, and it made her sick. I told her I appreciated her apology and her honesty. I also told her that she was right about one thing. I would always be okay, because I'd learned to build my own support system and my own family. I said she was welcome to be part of that family, but it would take time to rebuild trust. She agreed. We started having monthly coffee meetings, just the two of us, slowly reconstructing something that resembled a mother-son relationship. My sister and I haven't spoken since that phone call the day after my wedding. I've heard through family that she eventually started dating someone new. I wished her well from a distance, but didn't reach out. Some relationships don't survive the weight of their own dysfunction. My wife and I are expecting our first child now. When we announced the pregnancy, my mother cried happy tears and asked if she could be involved. I told her yes, with boundaries. She's respected those boundaries so far. My father has been steadily present, showing up to doctor's appointments and helping us prepare the nursery. My older brother is excited to be an uncle. My younger brother sent a congratulations text, but nothing more. My sister sent nothing at all. I don't know if she even knows about the pregnancy. Part of me hopes she's doing well in her own life. A larger part of me simply doesn't think about her anymore. The empty chairs at my wedding used to haunt me. Now they just remind me of the family I've built since then, the people who show up without being asked, who celebrate without competing, who love without conditions. My wife's family has become my family in ways that matter more than blood. And the family members who've made the effort to repair what was broken have earned their place in our lives. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just selective. Selective about who gets my time, my energy, my presence. My wedding taught me that showing up is a choice, and people's choices reveal their priorities. When someone shows you where you rank in their priorities, believe them. Nobody from my family came to my wedding, but plenty of family will be there when my child is born, and that's what matters now.